Billionaire cancels Christmas party. In rage after ex-wife accidentally sends a baby photo. Welcome to Secrets Narrated. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. When the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10 and share what you felt along the way. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with twists and hidden truths, make sure to follow Secrets Narrated so you don't miss the next one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy every detail. The grand staircase of the Brooks estate curved elegantly down into the main hall, where crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished marble floors. Nathaniel Brooks stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, watching the catering staff arrange champagne flutes on silver trays. "The ice sculptures arrive at 6, he said into the phone, his voice calm and measured. "Make sure they're positioned near the north entrance. And confirm the string quartet one more time." At 46, Nathaniel had perfected the art of control. His tailored charcoal suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders, and his dark hair, streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, was swept back with precision. Everything about him spoke of power carefully maintained, from his sharp jawline to the way he moved through spaces he owned. This Christmas party had been planned for months. 200 guests. Business partners from 3 continents. Old friends who'd supported him through the divorce. It was meant to be a statement. Nathaniel Brooks was fine. Better than fine. Thriving. 2 years had passed since Claire Whitman moved out of this house, taking only her clothes and the wedding photos she'd insisted on keeping. The divorce had been quiet, civilized, expensive. No scandal, no public drama. Just the slow, painful dissolution of a marriage that had started with promise and ended in silence. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, turning to survey the room. Everything looked perfect. The 12-foot Douglas fir stood near the grand piano, decorated with white lights and gold ornaments. Garlands of fresh pine draped the banisters. The scent of cinnamon and cloves drifted from the kitchen. It all looked like happiness. A young woman emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard catering uniform, black pants, white button-down shirt. But something about her caught his attention. Maybe it was the way she moved with quiet efficiency, or the focused expression on her face as she arranged the food with careful precision. She glanced up, caught him watching, and offered a brief professional smile before disappearing back into the kitchen. Nathaniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost ignored it. The first guests would arrive in less than an hour, and he still needed to change ties. But something made him pull it out. A message notification from Claire. His thumb hovered over the screen. They hadn't spoken in 4 months, not since the final paperwork was signed. He opened the message. It was a photo. A baby, maybe 16 months old, sitting on a living room floor surrounded by colorful blocks. Round cheeks, bright eyes, dark hair that stood up in soft tufts. The child was laughing at something beyond the camera's frame, tiny hands reaching forward. Nathaniel stared at the image, his chest tightening. Below the photo, a single line of text. "I thought you should know." His mind raced, doing calculations he didn't want to do. 2 years divorced, but they'd been separated for months before that. And before the separation, there'd been that last trip they'd taken to the cabin in Vermont, trying one final time to save what was already broken. The timeline fit. His hand trembled slightly as he dialed Claire's number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Nathaniel." Her voice was soft, cautious. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to see it that way. Is this real?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "That baby, his name is Oliver." She paused. "He's yours." The room seemed to tilt. Nathaniel pressed his free hand against the window frame, steadying himself. Outside, the landscaping crew was hanging the last of the exterior lights, oblivious to the moment unraveling inside. "When?" he managed. "When did you know?" "I found out 3 weeks after you went into the hospital for that surgery." Claire's words came faster now, defensive. "I tried to reach you. I sent messages, but the response I got back made it very clear you didn't want anything to do with it. So I stopped trying." "What response?" Nathaniel's mind scrambled through memories of that time. The emergency appendectomy, the complications, the days of sedation and recovery. "I never—" "Someone replied from your phone, Nathaniel. They said you were focused on recovery and didn't need complications, that it would be better if I handled things on my own." Her voice cracked slightly. "I got the message loud and clear." Ice flooded through his veins. He remembered very little from those hospital days. He'd been heavily sedated. His phone had been managed by his assistant, by his lawyer, by his sister who'd flown in from Seattle. Messages filtered, calls screened, everything handled so he could focus on healing. Someone had answered for him. Someone had decided he didn't deserve to know he had a son. Claire, he started, but she cut him off. I have to go. Oliver's crying. I thought you deserved to see him. Even if you don't want to be part of his life. The line went dead. Nathaniel stood frozen in his perfectly decorated mansion, surrounded by preparations for a party celebrating a life that suddenly felt like a lie. In his hand, the phone screen still showed the photo of a child he'd never met. A son who was now 16 months old. 16 months of first smiles, first steps, first words. All of it stolen from him by someone who thought they knew better. The catering manager appeared in the doorway. Mr. Brooks, the first guest, just pulled up the drive. Nathaniel looked at the photo one more time, then slowly slid the phone back into his pocket. He had a party to host, appearances to maintain. A life to pretend was exactly as it should be. But as he straightened his tie and prepared to greet the first arrivals, one question burned through everything else. Who had taken this from him? Have you ever discovered that someone made a life-changing decision for you without your knowledge or consent? What would you do if you found out a year later? Nathaniel shook hands with business associates whose names barely registered. He smiled at the right moments, nodded during conversations about market expansion and holiday plans, accepted compliments on the party's elegance with practiced grace. But his mind was elsewhere, trapped in the image of a child he'd never held. By 9 o'clock, the party was in full swing. The string quartet played softly near the piano. Guests mingled between the main hall and the conservatory, where a full bar had been set up beneath strings of white lights. Everything was exactly as he'd planned, and it all felt meaningless. He excused himself from a conversation about shipping routes and moved toward the terrace doors, needing air. But before he could escape, a hand touched his arm. Nathaniel, darling, you look exhausted. His older sister Margaret stood beside him in a crimson dress, her sharp eyes studying his face with concern. She'd flown in from Seattle yesterday, staying at the estate to help with final preparations. At 50, she still carried herself with the same commanding presence she'd had since childhood, elegant, poised, always knowing what needed to be done. I'm fine, he said automatically. You're lying. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. What happened? You've been distracted all evening. He considered telling her, but something held him back. That cold suspicion spreading through his chest, the question that wouldn't leave him alone. Who answered for me? Margaret had been there during his surgery. She'd managed his phone, filtered his messages, protected him from stress while he recovered. She'd done it out of love, he'd always believed. But now, just tired, he said, pulling away gently. Long day. Her expression shifted, hurt, maybe, or disappointment, but she nodded. If you need anything, I know where to find you. He stepped away before she could press further, weaving through clusters of guests until he reached the edge of the room. Near the kitchen entrance, the catering staff moved with choreographed efficiency, refreshing trays and clearing empty glasses. The blonde woman from earlier emerged carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Up close, she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe late 20s, early 30s. She had delicate features, fair skin dusted with a few freckles across her nose and green eyes that held a quiet intelligence. Her hair, pulled back in that simple ponytail, caught the light as she moved. She navigated through the crowd with the kind of awareness that came from years of working events like this, present but invisible, essential but overlooked. As she passed near him, one of the guests stumbled slightly, jostling her arm. The tray tilted dangerously. Nathaniel moved without thinking, his hand shooting out to steady the tray before any glasses fell. His fingers brushed against hers. Brief contact, but enough to register the warmth of her skin, the slight calluses that suggested someone who worked with her hands. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice carrying a soft, measured tone. She steadied the tray and met his eyes for just a moment. A flash of surprise, maybe embarrassment, then professional composure sliding back into place. Are you all right? He asked. Fine. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. She moved to step away, but he found himself speaking again. I don't think I caught your name. She hesitated, clearly weighing whether this was appropriate. Around them, the party continued its elegant noise. Laughter, conversation, the soft strain of violins. Lorelei, she said finally. Lorelei Ashford. You're good at this. he observed, working the room. Most people wouldn't have recovered from that stumble. A small smile touched her lips. Practice. I've been doing events like this for 5 years. She shifted the tray slightly, a subtle signal that she needed to keep moving. If you'll excuse me. Wait. The word came out more urgently than he intended. She stopped, those green eyes returning to his face with curiosity and caution. I'm sorry. Could you tell me who else is working from your company tonight? Specifically in the kitchen? Her brow furrowed slightly. There's me, 2 other servers, Chef Antoine and his sous chef, and the catering manager, Mrs. Delacroix. Why do you ask? No reason. Just making sure everything's running smoothly. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded politely and moved away, disappearing into the crowd with practiced efficiency. Nathaniel watched her go, then pulled out his phone. The photo of Oliver stared back at him from the screen. 16 months old. A stranger. His thumb moved to his message history, scrolling back to the time of his surgery. There, a gap of 4 days where his messages were sparse, clearly managed by someone else. And then, buried in a conversation with Claire he didn't remember having, a response that made his blood run cold. I'm focused on recovery right now. I don't need complications. It's better if you handle this on your own. The words were formal, detached. Nothing like how he would have written to the woman he'd been married to for 8 years, even in divorce. Someone had typed those words. Someone had sent them from his phone. Someone had decided he didn't deserve to know about his own child. Mr. Brooks? He looked up. Mrs. Delacroix, the catering manager, stood before him with a tablet in hand, her expression professional but slightly concerned. Yes? I just wanted to confirm. You asked about our staff? I did. Is there a problem? No problem. He slipped his phone away. Everything is excellent, thank you. She smiled, relieved, and moved on. But Nathaniel's mind was racing. He needed answers. He needed to know who had been in this house during those 4 days, who had access to his phone, who had thought they had the right to make decisions about his life. Across the room, Margaret was laughing with a group of his business partners, her hand gesturing elegantly as she told some story. She looked so comfortable here in his home, playing hostess as she'd done so many times before. His sister, who'd always known what was best for him, who'd always protected him, who'd been the one managing everything when he was most vulnerable. The thought made him sick. Near the kitchen entrance, he caught another glimpse of Lorelei as she emerged with a fresh tray. She moved through the crowd like water, graceful and unobtrusive. When she passed near the piano, she paused for just a moment, her expression softening as she listened to the music. Something in that unguarded moment, the way her shoulders relaxed, the small smile that touched her lips, made him see her differently, not just as staff, as a person with her own story, her own dreams, her own quiet beauty. Then the moment passed. She continued on, professional mask back in place. Nathaniel turned toward the terrace doors. He needed to get out of this room, away from the performance he'd been putting on all evening. But as he moved, he felt it, the weight of someone's gaze. He turned back. Margaret was watching him from across the room, her expression unreadable. And in that moment, standing in his own home surrounded by people celebrating a Christmas he no longer felt, Nathaniel realized something that made the betrayal cut even deeper. His sister knew he was looking for answers, which meant she knew what questions he was asking, which meant she already knew the truth. The terrace was cold, but Nathaniel welcomed it. He gripped the stone railing and stared out at the perfectly manicured lawn, now dusted with the first snow of December. String lights wrapped around the oak trees glowed softly in the darkness, casting shadows that shifted with the wind. Behind him, the party continued. Muffled music, laughter, the clink of glasses. A world he was no longer part of, even though it was happening in his own home. He pulled out his phone again, staring at Oliver's photo. The child's expression was so open, so full of joy, completely unaware that his father didn't even know he existed until tonight. You shouldn't be out here without a coat. He turned. Lorelei stood in the doorway, holding a silver tray now empty of glasses. She wore a black pea coat over her catering uniform, clearly on a break. I didn't realize I had company, he said. I was just stepping out for air. She hesitated. I can go back inside if you'd prefer to be alone. No. The word came quickly. Stay, please. She studied him for a moment, then moved to the railing a few feet away, careful to maintain professional distance. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed before, the way her blonde hair caught the light from the house, the faint scar above her right eyebrow, the the tired shadows beneath her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Long night?" he asked. "They all are this time of year." She pulled the coat tighter around herself. "Christmas parties, corporate events, weddings. December is our busiest season. You work a lot of events like this?" "3 or 4 a week, sometimes more." She glanced back at the house. "Yours is one of the nicer ones, if that means anything. Some people treat staff like furniture. You at least said thank you." The comment stung in a way she probably didn't intend. Here he was, the host of this elaborate party, and he'd barely noticed the people making it happen until one of them almost dropped a tray. "I should have done better than that," he said quietly. She looked at him with surprise. Most people don't even think about it. Maybe they should. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things unsaid. The snow was falling harder now, small flakes catching in her hair like tiny stars. "Can I ask you something?" Lorelei said finally. "And you can tell me it's none of my business." "Go ahead. You seem," she chose her words carefully, "like you're somewhere else tonight. Like this party is the last place you want to be." Nathaniel let out a breath that formed a small cloud in the cold air. "You're observant. It's part of the job. You learn to read people quickly, who's going to be demanding, who's going to tip well, who's about to have too much champagne and cause a scene." She turned to face him more fully. "You're not any of those things. You're just sad." The honesty of it caught him off guard. No one at the party had seen it. Or if they had, they'd been too polite to mention it. But this woman he'd just met, who had no reason to care, had noticed what everyone else missed. "I got some unexpected news tonight," he admitted. "The kind that changes everything." "Bad news?" "I'm not sure yet." He looked down at his phone, then made a decision. He turned the screen toward her, showing Oliver's photo. "I just found out I have a son. He's 16 months old, and I had no idea he existed until 2 hours ago." Lorelei's eyes widened. She looked at the photo, then back at Nathaniel, and he saw genuine compassion in her expression. "Oh my God. His mother tried to tell me when she found out she was pregnant, but someone intercepted the messages, responded for me, told her I didn't want to be involved." His voice hardened. "Someone decided I didn't deserve to know I had a child. Who would do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, "And I'm starting to have suspicions that make me sick." Lorelei was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then she said softly, "He's beautiful. Your son? I wouldn't know. I've never met him. But you could." She met his eyes. "Whatever happened, whoever did this, you know now. That means you can fix it. You can be in his life. Can I? His mother thinks I rejected her. Rejected him. Why would she let me anywhere near him now?" "Because the truth matters," Lorelei said firmly. "If she knew you never saw those messages that someone else responded, don't you think she'd want you to meet your son? Don't you think your son deserves to know his father?" The conviction in her voice surprised him. This wasn't just polite sympathy. She believed what she was saying with a passion that spoke of personal experience. "You sound like you know something about absent fathers," he observed gently. Her expression shifted, walls going up. "I shouldn't have said anything. This isn't my business." "Maybe I want it to be." She looked at him sharply, trying to determine if he was serious. Whatever she saw in his face must have convinced her, because the walls came down slightly. "My father left when I was 6, she said quietly. "Just walked out one day and never came back. My mom raised me and my younger brother on her own, worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and in school." Her voice carried old pain, carefully controlled. "I used to wonder if he ever thought about us, if he ever regretted leaving, if he even remembered he had kids. I'm sorry. Don't be. We survived. We're okay." She pulled her coat tighter. "But I wished he'd at least tried. Even if he couldn't be there all the time, if he'd just shown up once and said, 'I see you, I know you exist, you matter,' that would have been something." Nathaniel felt the weight of her words settle into his chest. Oliver was out there right now, a child who would grow up either knowing his father fought to be in his life, or believing his father hadn't cared enough to try. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being honest. For caring about a stranger's problems when you have no reason to." She smiled slightly. "Maybe I'm not as good at being invisible as I thought. Maybe I'm glad you're not." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then the terrace door opened, and Mrs. Delacroix appeared, her expression apologetic. "Lorelei, we need you inside. The dessert service is starting." "Of course." Lorelei straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. But before she left, she looked back at Nathaniel. "Talk to her." "His mother?" Tell her the truth. You'd be surprised what honesty can fix. Then she was gone, disappearing back into the warmth and light of the house. Nathaniel stood alone on the terrace, snow gathering on his shoulders. Inside, he could see Margaret laughing with guests, playing the perfect hostess. His sister, who'd been by his side through everything, who'd protected him, guided him, made decisions for him when he couldn't make them himself. Who might have stolen the most important thing that had ever happened to him? His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer, responding to the message he'd sent an hour ago. Found what you asked for. Hospital records show 3 people had access to your personal effects during your stay. Margaret Brooks, David Chen, your assistant, and Amanda Whitlock, head of PR. All 3 had your phone password. Want me to dig deeper? Nathaniel stared at the message as snow fell silently around him. 3 names. 3 people he trusted. 1 betrayal. The party ended just after midnight. Nathaniel stood in the doorway watching the last guests depart, their laughter fading into the December night. Margaret lingered near the staircase, supervising the catering staff as they began cleanup. "Wonderful evening, Nathaniel," she said, approaching him with a satisfied smile. "Everyone said it was your best party yet." He looked at his sister, really looked at her, trying to find traces of deception in her familiar features. The same eyes as their mother's, the same smile she'd worn when teaching him to ride a bike, when attending his college graduation, when standing beside him at his wedding. "Margaret, can we talk?" Something flickered across her face. "Of course, what is it?" "Not here." He glanced toward the main hall, where staff moved efficiently through their tasks. "My study." She followed him down the hallway, her heels clicking against hardwood floors. The study was dark except for the desk lamp he switched on. Leather-bound books lined the walls, and a portrait of their parents hung above the fireplace. Reminders of family, legacy, trust. Margaret settled into one of the wing chairs, crossing her legs elegantly. "Is something wrong?" Nathaniel remained standing, phone in hand. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. You're scaring me. 2 years ago, when I was in the hospital after the appendectomy, you managed my phone. You read my messages." Her expression shifted to concern. "Yes, we all did. You were sedated for days. We were trying to protect you from unnecessary stress while you recovered. Did Claire contact me during that time?" Margaret's face went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant murmur of cleanup from the main hall. "Why are you asking about Claire?" she said finally. "Because I found out tonight that I have a son, a 16-month-old son that I knew nothing about." His voice remained controlled, but anger simmered beneath. "Claire tried to tell me she was pregnant. Someone responded to her messages. Someone told her I didn't want to be involved." Margaret stood abruptly. "Nathaniel, was it you? It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." He held up his phone, showing her the message history. "Did you send these messages from my phone?" She looked at the screen, and he saw the answer in her eyes before she spoke. Guilt, justification, the complex expression of someone who'd done something they believed was right, even if it was wrong. "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." The confirmation hit him like a physical blow. Even though he'd suspected it, even though all the evidence pointed to her, hearing her admit it made it real in a way that stole his breath. "How could you?" The words came out raw, broken. "Because you were barely holding yourself together." Margaret's composure cracked. "You and Claire had just separated. You were talking about divorce. You were depressed, exhausted, throwing yourself into work to avoid dealing with the pain. Then you ended up in emergency surgery, and I thought—" She stopped, collecting herself. "I thought a baby would destroy you. That wasn't your decision to make. You're my little brother. I've been protecting you since we were children. I wasn't going to stand by and watch you get trapped in a situation you'd already said you didn't want. I never said I didn't want children. I said Claire, and I couldn't agree on when. You told me yourself, Nathaniel, that the marriage ended partly because she wanted kids, and you weren't ready." Margaret's voice hardened with conviction. "So when she messaged saying she was pregnant, after everything you'd been through, I made a choice. I thought I was giving you freedom. You gave me nothing but lies." He felt something breaking inside him, a foundation he'd built his entire life on. "You stole 16 months from me. 16 months I can never get back. I was trying to help. You were trying to control my life." Margaret flinched as if he'd struck her. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" He moved closer, and she actually stepped back. "I have a son I've never met. A child who thinks his father abandoned him before he was even born. And you did that. You made that choice for both of us. I don't care what you thought. His voice rose for the first time, years of controlled emotion finally breaking through. You had no right. Silence crashed between them. Margaret's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. I'm sorry, she whispered. I truly believed I was doing what was best for you. Get out of my house. Nathaniel, get out. Now. She stared at him for a long moment, then gathered her dignity and walked to the door. She paused in the doorway, her back to him. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I do love you. Everything I've ever done has been because I love you. That's not love, Margaret. That's control. She left without another word. Nathaniel sank into the chair she'd vacated, hands shaking. The room felt too small, the air too thick. He'd just banished his only sibling from his life, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Brooks? He looked up. Lorelei stood in the doorway, still in her catering uniform, concern etched across her features. The rest of the staff must have finished and left, but she'd stayed. I heard raised voices, she said carefully. Mrs. Delacroix sent me to check if everything was all right. Nothing's all right. The words came out more honestly than he intended. But thank you for checking. She should have left then. Should have returned to her manager, collected her things, and gone home. Instead, she stepped into the study, closing the door behind her. Was it her? Your sister? He nodded, not trusting his voice. Lorelei crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite him, breaking every rule of professional distance. I'm so sorry. She thought she was protecting me, making decisions I was too weak to make myself. He laughed bitterly. Maybe she was right. Maybe I am too weak. No. The firmness in Lorelei's voice made him look up. Being hurt doesn't make you weak. Being betrayed by someone you trust doesn't make you weak. And feeling overwhelmed by all of this, that's not weakness. That's being human. He held her gaze, finding unexpected strength in those green eyes. She'd known him for less than 3 hours, but somehow she saw him more clearly than people who'd known him his whole life. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. You do what you said you'd do. You call your son's mother. You tell her the truth. You fight to be part of his life. She leaned forward slightly. And you stop letting other people decide what you're strong enough to handle. Just like that. Just like that. A small smile touched his lips despite everything. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones who make it complicated. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lorelei glanced at her watch and stood. I should go. My shift ended 20 minutes ago. Wait. Nathaniel stood as well. Would it be inappropriate if I asked for your number? She looked at him with surprise, then something softer. Consideration, curiosity, maybe a hint of the same unexpected connection he felt. It would be very inappropriate, she said slowly. You're a client. I'm hired help. That's about as clear a line as it gets. Right, of course, I apologize. But, she interrupted, pulling a pen from her pocket and writing on a catering receipt. I'm off duty now, which means I'm just someone who met someone else at a party. She handed him the paper. Text me when you talk to your son's mother. Let me know how it goes. He looked at the number, then back at her. Why are you doing this? Because everyone deserves someone in their corner. And right now it seems like you don't have many people left. She left before he could respond, the door clicking softly behind her. Nathaniel stood alone in his study, holding a receipt with 10 digits that felt like the only real thing in a house full of lies. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire. We need to talk. Really talk. Can you come by tomorrow? He looked at Lorelei's number, then at Oliver's photo, then out at the empty hallway where his sister had disappeared. Everything was breaking apart. But maybe, just maybe, that meant he could rebuild it right this time. He typed his response to Claire. I'll be there at noon. And Claire, I never sent those messages. I never knew about Oliver. I promise you, I never knew. The address Claire sent him led to a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood 30 minutes from his estate. Nathaniel sat in his car for 5 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady his breathing. Through the front window he could see movement, shadows passing back and forth. His son was in there. Oliver, a child he'd helped create but had never held, never heard cry, never watched sleep. His phone buzzed. A text from Lorelei. You've got this. Just be honest. That's all anyone can ask. She'd been texting him since last night. Not constantly. Just small messages of encouragement that somehow made the whole thing feel less impossible. He didn't know why she cared, but he was grateful she did. He typed back, about to go in, terrified. Her response came immediately. Good. That means you care. Now go meet your son. Nathaniel pocketed his phone and walked to the front door. Before he could knock, it opened. Claire stood in the doorway, and the sight of her brought back a flood of memories, good ones and painful ones tangled together. She looked different than he remembered. Her dark hair was shorter, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater. No makeup. Tired, but somehow more at peace than she'd been during their marriage. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Two people who'd shared 8 years of their lives, now strangers trying to find common ground. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside. The townhouse was small but warmly decorated. Children's toys scattered the living room floor. Colorful blocks, stuffed animals, a plastic train set. Photos covered the walls, and Nathaniel's chest tightened when he saw them. Oliver as a newborn. Oliver's first smile. Oliver covered in what looked like birthday cake. 16 months of moments he'd missed. "He's napping right now," Claire said, gesturing toward the couch. "We should talk first." They sat, careful distance between them. Nathaniel noticed a baby monitor on the coffee table, soft breathing sounds coming through the speaker. "I got your message," Claire began. "You said you never knew." "I didn't. I swear to you, Claire, I had no idea you were pregnant. I never saw your messages." "Then who responded?" "My sister." The words tasted bitter. "Margaret. She admitted it last night. She thought she was protecting me from a situation I wasn't ready for. She decided, without asking me, that I didn't deserve to know about my own child." Claire's expression shifted from skepticism to shock to something like understanding. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I'd seen even one of your messages, I would have been there. I would have wanted to be there." She studied his face, looking for deception and finding none. "I believe you." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you. But Nathaniel, you have to understand. I built a life around the belief that you'd rejected us. I made plans, set boundaries. Oliver and I have a routine. I can't just—" A sound from the monitor interrupted her. A soft whimper, then a more insistent cry. "He's awake," Claire said, standing. "Do you want to meet him?" Nathaniel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Yes." He followed her down a short hallway to a small bedroom painted pale blue. A crib stood against one wall covered in clouds and stars. And standing in that crib, holding onto the railing with chubby hands, was Oliver. The photo hadn't done him justice. He was real and solid and absolutely beautiful. Dark hair sticking up in every direction, round cheeks flushed from sleep, bright eyes that widened when he saw his mother. "Hey, sweetheart," Claire said softly, lifting him from the crib. "Someone's here to meet you." Oliver looked at Nathaniel with curiosity but no fear. He wore a onesie with a dinosaur on the front, and his little sock-covered feet kicked slightly as Claire held him. "Oliver," she said gently, "this is Nathaniel. He's your daddy." The word hit Nathaniel like a truck. Daddy. He was someone's daddy. "Can I?" His voice cracked. "Can I hold him?" Claire hesitated only briefly, then moved closer. "Support his head and back. He's sturdy, but he's still getting used to new people." She transferred Oliver into Nathaniel's arms, and the weight of his son, solid, warm, alive, made everything else disappear. Oliver stared up at him with those bright eyes, one small hand reaching up to touch Nathaniel's face. "Hi," Nathaniel whispered, his throat tight. "Hi, Oliver." The baby made a sound. Not quite a word, but something close. His tiny fingers patted Nathaniel's cheek, exploring this new person with unself-conscious wonder. "He likes you," Claire said softly, and there was emotion in her voice too. Nathaniel couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but hold his son and try not to break down completely. 16 months he'd missed. First breaths, first smiles, first steps. But this moment, this first real meeting, this was his. They moved back to the living room. Nathaniel sat on the floor with Oliver, who immediately became fascinated with his watch, trying to pull it off his wrist with determined little hands. "He's obsessed with shiny things," Claire said, sitting cross-legged nearby. "Last week he tried to eat my keys. Is he healthy? Happy?" "Very. He had a cold last month, but otherwise he's been great. Sleeps through most nights now. Loves music. Hates green vegetables." Nathaniel watched Oliver stack blocks with intense concentration, knocking them down with delighted laughter each time they fell. Every gesture, every sound, every expression felt like a treasure he'd been denied but was now reclaiming. "I want to be in his life," Nathaniel said, not looking away from Oliver. "However that works, whatever boundaries you need to set, I want to be his father." Claire was quiet for a long moment. This is going to be complicated. I know. We'll need lawyers, custody arrangements, schedules, whatever it takes. And Nathaniel, she waited until he looked at her. I need to know you're serious, that you're not going to show up for a few weeks and then disappear when things get hard. Because if you're going to be in his life, you need to be all in. I am. I promise you, I am. She searched his face, then nodded slowly. Okay, we'll figure it out. Oliver crawled over to Nathaniel, using his leg to pull himself up to standing. He wobbled slightly, then broke into a huge grin, proud of his accomplishment. Nathaniel steadied him gently. Good job, buddy. He stayed for 2 hours, playing with Oliver, talking with Claire about logistics and schedules and all the practical details of shared parenting. It was awkward and sometimes painful, revisiting the failure of their marriage while trying to build a new relationship as co-parents. But when he left, driving back toward his empty mansion, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. His phone buzzed at a red light. Lorelei. How did it go? He pulled over to respond properly. I met him. I held my son. It was the best and worst moment of my life. Why worst? Because I realized how much I've missed, and how much I almost lost forever. Her response took a minute. But you didn't lose it. You found it. That's what matters now. Can I see you? I know it's forward, but I'd really like to talk to someone who isn't family or lawyers or my ex-wife. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm working a brunch event until 3, but there's a coffee shop on Elm Street, Maxwell's. I could meet you there at 4? Nathaniel smiled at the phone. I'll be there. He drove home feeling lighter than he had in months, but as he pulled into his driveway, that lightness evaporated. Margaret's car was parked in front of his house, and she wasn't alone. 3 other cars sat beside hers, including his lawyer's Mercedes and his PR director's BMW. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than a simple apology. Nathaniel's phone rang. His lawyer. Don't come inside yet, Jonathan said without preamble. We need to talk first. Margaret called an emergency meeting. She's telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. She wants to invoke the medical power of attorney clause in your company bylaws. Ice flooded Nathaniel's veins. She wants to what? She's trying to take control of your company. She's arguing that your recent erratic behavior, confronting her publicly, this sudden obsession with a child you've never met, proves you're not mentally stable enough to run Brooks International. That's insane. Maybe, but she's got your PR director and your CFO in there, and she's very convincing. Jonathan paused. Nathaniel, if she succeeds, you won't just lose the company. You'll lose any credibility in a custody battle for Oliver. No judge will give you access to a child if they think you're mentally unfit. Nathaniel gripped the phone, staring at his sister's car. She wasn't just controlling his past anymore. She was trying to control his entire future. Nathaniel walked into his own home like a stranger entering hostile territory. Voices drifted from the conference room, the space he'd built specifically for high-level business meetings, now being used against him. Jonathan met him in the hallway, briefcase in hand, expression grim. They've been in there for 40 minutes, his lawyer said quietly. Margaret has documentation, emails you sent during your recovery that she claims show emotional instability, records of your confrontation with her last night, even testimony from staff who say you've been distracted and erratic. I was distracted because I just found out I have a son. I know, but she's spinning it differently. She's saying you're obsessing over a child you've never met, that you're making impulsive decisions, that you banished your only family member in a fit of rage. Jonathan paused. Nathaniel, she's building a case that you're having a breakdown. So what do? You go in there and prove her wrong. Show them you're completely in control, rational, and fit to run your own company. He handed Nathaniel a folder. I pulled everything we might need. Medical records showing you were fully recovered from surgery within 3 weeks. Financial reports showing the company's performed better than ever under your leadership. Character references from board members. But the best defense is you. Stay calm, stay factual, and don't let her provoke you. Nathaniel took the folder and squared his shoulders. Let's end this. The conference room fell silent when he entered. Margaret sat at the head of the table, his usual seat, flanked by Amanda Whitlock, his PR director, and Gerald Foster, his CFO. They all looked uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and uncertainty. Nathaniel, Margaret said, standing with manufactured concern. We were just discussing. I know exactly what you were discussing. He moved to the opposite end of the table, remaining standing, maintaining the power position. You're trying to convince my leadership team that I'm mentally unfit to run my own company. That's not, Amanda started, but Margaret cut her off. We're concerned about you, Nathaniel. Your behavior over the past 48 hours has been extremely troubling. Troubling? He kept his voice level, controlled. Let me tell you what's troubling. 2 years ago, while I was sedated in a hospital, you took it upon yourself to intercept messages from my ex-wife telling me she was pregnant with my child. You responded for me, telling her I wanted nothing to do with the baby. You stole 16 months of my son's life from me. Gerald's eyes widened. Amanda's mouth fell open. Margaret's composure cracked. That's a distortion of what happened. Is it? Because you admitted it to me last night. You said you thought you were protecting me. Nathaniel opened the folder Jonathan had given him. Here are the phone records showing messages sent from my phone during the exact days I was sedated. Here's the hospital log confirming I couldn't have typed them myself. And here, he pulled out a printed photo of Oliver. Here is my son, who I met for the first time this morning because you decided I didn't deserve to know he existed. The room was dead silent. Margaret made a personal decision that had nothing to do with my mental state or my ability to run this company. Nathaniel continued, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. When I discovered the truth, I confronted her. I asked her to leave my home. That's not a breakdown. That's a reasonable response to a profound betrayal. Amanda cleared her throat. I had no idea about any of this. Neither did I, Gerald added, looking at Margaret with something like disgust. You told us he was obsessing over a phantom child, that he was making up conspiracy theories about his hospital stay. Margaret's face flushed. I was trying to spare him. You were trying to control him, Amanda said flatly. Just like you always do. The words hung in the air. Nathaniel watched his sister's carefully constructed narrative collapse around her. I think we're done here, Gerald said, standing. Nathaniel, you have my complete support. Whatever you need moving forward. Mine too, Amanda agreed. And Margaret, I think you should leave. Now. Margaret looked around the table, seeing her support evaporate. Her eyes met Nathaniel's, and for a moment he saw past the control, past the manipulation, to the fear underneath. Fear of losing him, fear of being wrong, fear of facing consequences. I was trying to help, she said quietly. One last attempt. You were trying to play God with my life, Nathaniel replied. And it ends now. She gathered her things with as much dignity as she could manage and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. After Gerald and Amanda left, Jonathan clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder. That was masterful. You kept your composure, presented evidence, and let her hang herself. The board won't question your fitness to lead after that. Good, because I have somewhere I need to be. He checked his watch. 3:45. He could still make it to the coffee shop on time. Maxwell's was a cozy place, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, the smell of fresh ground coffee filling the air. Nathaniel spotted Lorelei immediately. She sat at a corner table near the window, changed out of her catering uniform into jeans and a soft cream-colored sweater. Her blonde hair was down now, falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She looked up when he approached, and her smile made something in his chest ease. You made it, she said, and barely. He sat across from her, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. It's been a day. Tell me about it, but first, she slid a cup across the table to him. Black coffee, no sugar. I took a guess based on your personality. He smiled despite everything. That obvious? You strike me as someone who doesn't like unnecessary complications. If only that were true. He took a sip. It was perfect. How was your event? Boring corporate brunch. But it paid well, so I'm not complaining. She studied his face. You look like you've been through war. Close. He told her everything. Meeting Oliver. The joy and pain of that first meeting. Coming home to find Margaret's ambush. The confrontation in the conference room. She listened without interrupting, her green eyes intent on his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your sister really is something, she said finally. That's diplomatic. I was trying to be nice. What I actually think isn't appropriate for a coffee shop. She leaned forward slightly. But Nathaniel, what you did, standing up to her, fighting for your son, refusing to let her control your narrative, that took real courage. Didn't feel like courage. Felt like survival. Sometimes that's the same thing. They talked for over an hour. About Oliver, about co-parenting with Claire, about the complicated mess of rebuilding trust. But they also talked about other things. Her work, her family, Her younger brother, who was in college studying engineering. He's the smart one, she said with obvious pride. Full scholarship to Penn State. He's going to build bridges or design skyscrapers or something incredible. Sounds like it runs in the family. The incredible part, I mean. She blushed slightly, looking down at her coffee. I serve hors d'oeuvres at parties. It's not exactly changing the world. You helped me through the worst night of my life. That changed my world. Her eyes met his, and something electric passed between them. Awareness. Connection. The recognition that this was becoming something neither of them had planned for. Nathaniel, she said softly, you know this is complicated, right? You're dealing with custody issues, family betrayal, running a company. You're the first person in years who's seen me as just a person, not as a business opportunity or a family obligation or someone who needs to be managed. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. I'm not asking for anything complicated. I'm just asking if I can see you again. She looked at his hand, hovering near hers. Then slowly, deliberately, she closed the distance, her fingers brushing against his. Coffee, she said. Just coffee. Nothing more until you've sorted out your life. Deal. They stayed until the coffee shop closed at 6, reluctant to end the conversation. When they finally left, walking out into the cold December evening, Nathaniel felt lighter than he had in days. His phone buzzed as they reached their cars. A text from Claire. Oliver's been asking about you. He keeps saying Dada and looking at the door. I think he's waiting for you to come back. The message was followed by a video. Nathaniel opened it, and there was his son sitting on the living room floor, pointing at the door and repeating that single perfect word. Dada, Dada, Dada. He showed it to Lorelei, and she pressed her hand to her heart. Oh my God, that's the sweetest thing I've ever seen. He remembers me, Nathaniel said, his voice thick. Of course he does. You're his father. He looked up from the phone to find Lorelei watching him with such warmth, such genuine happiness for him, that it took his breath away. Thank you, he said, for everything. She smiled. Same time next week? I'll be counting the days. He watched her drive away, then checked his messages. Another text had come in, this one from an unknown number. You think you've won, but I'm not done protecting you from yourself. Margaret. Below it a second message. Claire doesn't deserve Oliver, and neither do you. I'll prove it. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of learning how to be a father, of splitting time between board meetings and building block towers, of late-night texts with Lorelei that made him smile at his phone like a teenager. Nathaniel had established a routine with Claire, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday mornings with Oliver. It wasn't enough, but it was a start, and every moment with his son felt like a gift he'd almost lost forever. On this particular Saturday morning, he sat on Claire's living room floor teaching Oliver to stack rings on a plastic cone. The boy's concentration was fierce, his little tongue poking out slightly as he tried to get the blue ring over the yellow one. He's getting so good at that, Claire said from the kitchen where she was making coffee. Last week he couldn't figure out the sizes at all. He's brilliant, Nathaniel said seriously, making Claire laugh. Every parent thinks their kid is brilliant. No, Oliver actually is. Look at how he's problem-solving. He's trying different approaches. Oliver knocked all the rings off in frustration, then looked up at Nathaniel with an expression that clearly said, help me. All right, buddy. Let's try together. Nathaniel guided the small hands, showing him how to pick the largest ring first. When Oliver finally got it right, his face lit up with such pure joy that Nathaniel's heart felt like it might burst. Dada! Oliver threw his arms up in triumph. Good job. Nathaniel pulled him into a hug, breathing in that baby shampoo smell, feeling the solid weight of his son in his arms. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Now. Something about the message made his stomach drop. He pulled up his email while Oliver played with his watch band. The email had no subject line, no sender name, just a video attachment. He opened it. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a security camera. It showed Claire's townhouse from across the street, date stamped 2 nights ago. The angle captured the front door, the small porch, the living room window, and it showed Claire letting someone inside at 11 p.m. A man, tall, dark-haired, wearing a jacket Nathaniel didn't recognize. The video continued. Lights turning off. The man not leaving. His blood ran cold. A second email arrived. Does she seem like a fit mother to you? Leaving your son with strangers? Bringing men home in the middle of the night? Maybe I was right about both of you. Margaret. Everything okay? Claire asked, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Nathaniel's mind raced. The protective fury that rose in him wasn't about jealousy. They were divorced. She could see whoever she wanted. But Oliver was in that house. And if this video existed, if Margaret was collecting evidence, we need to talk, he said carefully. Claire set down the mugs, reading his expression. What happened? He showed her the video. Watched the color drain from her face. Oh my God, she breathed. That's my brother. Your what? My brother, Dean. He drove up from Virginia because our mom was in the hospital. He needed a place to crash for the night. Her hands were shaking. Nathaniel, you can't think. I don't. But Margaret does. Or at least, she's trying to make it look that way. He replayed the video, noting the angle, the clarity. This was taken from a parked car. She's been watching your house. Claire sank onto the couch, her face pale. She's building a case. She's trying to prove I'm an unfit mother, and that I have poor judgment for wanting to co-parent with you. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. She's going after both of us. Oliver, sensing the tension, started to fuss. Claire automatically reached for him, pulling him onto her lap, but her eyes were distant with fear. What do we do? She asked quietly. We document everything. Get a restraining order. Prove she's been stalking you. He stood, pacing. I'll call my lawyer right now. Nathaniel, Claire's voice cracked. What if she succeeds? What if some judge looks at this video and decides Oliver isn't safe with me? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. I'm a single mother living in a small townhouse working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She's a wealthy, connected woman with resources I can't even imagine. If she wants to destroy me, she won't. He knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. I promise you, Claire, I will not let her take Oliver from you or from me. We'll fight this together. She nodded, tears spilling over. Oliver reached up to pat her face, confused but trying to comfort her. By the time Nathaniel met Lorelei for coffee that afternoon, he was exhausted and furious. She took one look at his face and immediately shifted from their usual table to a more private corner. What happened? He told her everything. The video, Margaret's surveillance, the threat to Claire. Lorelei's expression darkened. She's actually stalking your ex-wife? That's not just controlling anymore, Nathaniel. That's dangerous. I know. I've already called my lawyer. We're filing for a restraining order Monday morning. Good. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Over the past 3 weeks, these small touches had become natural, comforting contact that both of them needed, but neither fully acknowledged. How's Claire holding up? Terrified, and I don't blame her. Margaret's not going to stop until she's proven some twisted point about knowing what's best for everyone. Lorelei was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, Can I ask you something that might sound strange? Of course. When you described Margaret earlier, the way she controls things, makes decisions for people, genuinely believes she's helping even when she's hurting. It reminded me of something I saw once. She hesitated. My mom dated a guy for a while who had a similar dynamic with his kids. Loving, but suffocating. Protective to the point of being destructive. What happened to him? He ended up alone. His kids eventually had to cut him out completely because he couldn't stop trying to control their lives, even when they were adults with families of their own. She squeezed his hand. I'm not saying that's what will happen with Margaret. But sometimes people who love too much don't realize they're the ones causing the most damage. Nathaniel thought about his sister, how she'd been there for him his entire life, how she'd celebrated his victories and protected him from failures, how somewhere along the way, that protection had turned into something darker. I don't want to hate her, he admitted quietly. She's my sister, my only family besides Oliver now. You don't have to hate her, but you do have to set boundaries. Real ones. The kind she can't cross without consequences. I know. He looked at their joined hands. How did you get so wise? Lots of therapy after my dad left. She smiled slightly. Turns out abandonment issues make you really good at understanding dysfunction. He laughed despite everything. And she did too. And for a moment the weight of it all felt manageable. His phone rang. Jonathan, his lawyer. I need to take this, he said apologetically. Go ahead. He answered, still holding Lorelei's hand. Jonathan, we've got a problem. His lawyer's voice was tight. I did some digging into Margaret's activities over the past month. She's not just watching Claire's house. She's been contacting people, your business partners, Claire's employer, even Oliver's pediatrician. She's asking questions, making implications, building a narrative. How bad? Bad. She's positioning herself as the concerned family member trying to protect a vulnerable child from 2 unstable parents. And Nathaniel, some people are listening. Your PR director just called me. Apparently there's buzz in your industry circles about your personal instability. Nathaniel closed his eyes. She's destroying my reputation. She's trying to. But here's the thing, she got sloppy. She contacted Claire's employer using a fake name, but the IP address traces back to her home office. That's actionable. We can prove harassment, maybe even defamation. Do it. File everything. There's one more thing. Jonathan paused. She tried to hire a private investigator to follow you. He refused. Said the job description made him uncomfortable. But he kept the emails. And Nathaniel, she specifically asked him to dig into any inappropriate relationships you might be developing. She mentioned a catering worker by name. Ice flooded his veins. What name? Lorelei Ashford. Across the table, Lorelei's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, to something like fear, as she watched his face change. She's coming after you too, Nathaniel said quietly, looking at her. My sister is investigating you. Lorelei stared at him across the coffee shop table, the color draining from her face. She's investigating me? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Why? I haven't done anything wrong. Because you matter to me. Nathaniel's grip tightened on the phone. And she's trying to find anything she can use to prove I'm making poor decisions, associating with the wrong people. I serve food at parties, Nathaniel. What could she possibly? Lorelei stopped, realization dawning. Oh God, my dad. What about your dad? She pulled her hand away, wrapping both arms around herself. When he left, things got complicated. There were debts he didn't pay, legal issues he left behind. My mom's name was on some of those accounts. We spent years cleaning up his mess. Her voice shook slightly. If someone digs deep enough, if they want to paint me in a bad light, they could make it look like my family has a history of financial instability, questionable associations. That's not. It doesn't matter if it's fair, Nathaniel. It matters what a judge might think if your sister presents it the right way. She stood abruptly. I can't be the reason you lose your son. Where are you going? Home. Away from you. This. She gestured between them. Whatever this is, it's not worth putting Oliver at risk. Lorelei, wait. But she was already grabbing her coat, moving toward the door with that same efficient grace she'd shown the night they met. Nathaniel threw money on the table and followed her into the parking lot. Lorelei, please, stop. She turned and he saw tears streaming down her face. Do you know what it's like to watch your mom work 3 jobs because your dad destroyed your family's credit? To see her exhausted every single day, barely keeping food on the table, all because she trusted the wrong person? I can't imagine. I swore I would never be the person who complicated someone else's life. I would never be the reason someone lost something important. Her voice broke. And now your sister is going to dig up every painful detail of my family's past and use it against you. Against your son. None of that is your fault. But it's my history. My baggage. She wiped at her tears angrily. You need someone without complications. Someone who can't be used as a weapon against you. Nathaniel closed the distance between them, and before she could step away, he pulled her into his arms. She resisted for only a moment before collapsing against his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Listen to me, he said quietly, one hand cradling the back of her head. Margaret spent my entire life convincing me that I needed protection, that I couldn't handle complications, that other people knew better than I did what was good for me. I'm not letting her do that anymore. Not about Oliver. Not about my company. He pulled back enough to look at her face. And sure as hell not about you. Nathaniel, I don't care what she finds. I don't care what she tries to use. You're not a complication, Lorelei. You're... He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. Realizing it was too soon, too fast, too much. You're important to me, and I'm not letting her take that away. She looked up at him, green eyes searching his face. This is insane. We barely know each other. I know enough. For a long moment they stood there in the cold December parking lot, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Then Lorelei's phone rang. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted to confusion. It's Mrs. Delacroix, my boss, she answered. Hello? Nathaniel watched her face change as she listened, confusion giving way to shock, then to something like devastation. I understand, she said finally, her voice hollow. Thank you for letting me know. She ended the call and stared at the phone in her hand. What happened? Nathaniel asked. I've been let go. Mrs. Delacroix said they received complaints about my unprofessional conduct at events. Multiple complaints from different clients all in the past week. She looked up at him. Nathaniel, I've worked for that company for 5 years without a single complaint. And suddenly, right after your sister starts investigating me, I lose my job. She's targeting your livelihood. Anger burned through him, white-hot and focused. That's not just harassment anymore, that's effective, Lorelei finished bitterly. That's what it is. She's showing me exactly what happens when I get close to you. No, she's proving how desperate she is. He pulled out his own phone. Jonathan, I need you to add wrongful termination to the case. Margaret just cost someone their job. While he talked to his lawyer, Lorelei walked to her car and leaned against it, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. When he finished the call, he found her staring at nothing, defeat written across her features. I can't fight her, she said quietly. I don't have the resources, the connections, the money. She can destroy my entire life, and I can't do anything to stop her. You're not alone in this. I am, though. You have lawyers and power and options. I have rent due next week and no job. The reminder of their different worlds hit him hard. He'd been so focused on the connection between them, he'd forgotten how vastly different their circumstances were. She was losing her job because of him. Her privacy was being invaded because of him. Her entire life was being turned upside down because she'd been kind to a stranger at a Christmas party. Let me help, he said. Help how? Give me money? She shook her head. I can't be the woman who... Work for me then. Not as charity. As my executive assistant. Jonathan mentioned he's overwhelmed with everything happening, and I need someone I can trust. He could see her about to protest and rushed on. You're organized, efficient. You read people better than anyone I've ever met. You'd be perfect for it. Nathaniel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but $25 an hour to start, full benefits, flexible schedule so you can still pick up freelance catering if you want. It's a real job with real responsibilities, not a handout. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing pride against practicality. Why are you doing this? Because Margaret's right about one thing. I do make decisions based on what I want, not what other people think I should want. And I want you in my life, not despite the complications, but including them. A car pulled into the parking lot and both of them tensed, but it was just a young couple heading into the coffee shop. The paranoia was setting in, the feeling of being watched, targeted, hunted. I need to think about this, Lorelei said finally. The job offer, all of it. This is happening so fast. I understand. But Nathaniel, she reached out, touching his face gently. Thank you for not running when this got messy. Most people would have. I'm not most people. No, she agreed softly. You're really not. He walked her to her car, watched her drive away, then stood alone in the parking lot as night fell around him. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Someone called Child Protective Services. They're sending a caseworker to inspect my home tomorrow. Please tell me you know who did this. Nathaniel closed his eyes, rage and helplessness warring inside him. Margaret wasn't just investigating anymore. She was actively trying to take Oliver away, and she was using every weapon she could find, including Lorelei, to do it. He dialed his lawyer's number again, then stopped. There was someone else he needed to call first. Someone who knew Margaret better than anyone, who might know how to stop her before she destroyed everything. He scrolled through his contacts to a name he hadn't called in 15 years. Richard Brooks, his father's younger brother. The family member who'd been cut off by Margaret years ago after what she'd called betrayal. Maybe it was time to find out what really happened. Maybe his sister's pattern of control went back further than he'd ever realized. Richard Brooks answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious. Nathaniel, Uncle Richard, I know it's been a long time, 15 years. Not that I'm counting. There was no bitterness in his tone, just statement of fact. What made you finally call? Nathaniel sat in his car outside the coffee shop, engine running for heat. Margaret, I need to know what really happened between you two. Why she cut you out of the family. A long silence. Then, you ready to hear it? I need to hear it. Your sister told everyone I embezzled money from the family business. Said I betrayed your father's trust, tried to destroy everything he built. Richard's voice was steady, controlled. The truth is, I disagreed with her about your father's medical care. He was dying, Nathaniel. Cancer had spread everywhere. He was in pain, wanted to stop treatment, wanted to die at home with dignity. Nathaniel's breath caught. I remember. I was 21, away at school. Margaret said the doctors wanted him to keep fighting. The doctors said there was nothing more to do. Margaret wouldn't accept it. She kept pushing for experimental treatments, more surgeries, anything to keep him alive. Your father begged me to talk to her. To make her understand he was ready to let go, Richard paused. So I did. I told her she needed to respect his wishes, that keeping him alive for her sake, not his, was cruel. What happened? She had me removed from his medical proxy. Convinced your mother I was trying to speed up his death to get my inheritance faster. By the time he finally passed, 3 months later after procedures that left him barely conscious, she'd already turned the whole family against me. The embezzlement charges were just the final nail in the coffin. Nathaniel felt sick. She lied about all of it? She believed her own narrative. In Margaret's mind, she was protecting your father from my cruelty, just like she probably believes she's protecting you now. Richard's voice softened. I'm guessing something similar is happening? Nathaniel told him everything. Oliver, the intercepted messages, Margaret's escalating attempts to control his life, and now destroy anyone who got close to him. That sounds exactly like her, Richard said when he finished. Margaret can't distinguish between love and control. She thinks making decisions for people is the same as caring for them. And when people resist, when they try to choose their own path, she sees it as betrayal. How do I stop her? You can't. Not really. You can set boundaries, protect yourself and the people you care about, but Margaret will always believe she knows best. The question is whether you're willing to lose your sister to gain your freedom. The words hit hard. Nathaniel had been so focused on fighting Margaret's actions, he hadn't fully confronted the larger truth. This might be permanent. Their relationship might be irreparable. I already lost her, he said quietly, the moment I found out what she did. I'm sorry. I know that's not easy. Richard paused. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Fighting for your son. That's what matters. After they hung up, Nathaniel sat in the darkness of his car, processing everything. His whole childhood, Margaret had been there, guiding him, protecting him, making sure he succeeded. But how much of his life had actually been his own choice? How many decisions had she influenced or made for him without his knowledge? His phone rang. Claire. The caseworker just left, she said without preamble. Her voice sounded shaky but controlled. She was thorough. Checked everything. The kitchen, Oliver's room. Asked about my work schedule, my childcare arrangements, even my dating life. And she said everything looked fine, that the complaint seemed unfounded. Claire let out a breath. But Nathaniel, she also said that CPS takes multiple complaints seriously. If someone files again, they'll have to investigate more deeply, maybe even require home visits, monitoring. Margaret's not going to stop with one try. I know. That's what scares me. She was quiet for a moment. Oliver kept asking for you today. I think he senses something's wrong. Guilt twisted in Nathaniel's chest. His son shouldn't have to feel this tension, this instability. Can I come see him tomorrow? Please, I think he needs that. After ending the call, Nathaniel drove home. But instead of the empty mansion, he found himself pulling up to a small apartment complex on the east side of town. He'd looked up Lorelei's address in the employment records from the catering company. Borderline stalking maybe, but he needed to see her. He texted from the parking lot. I'm outside your building. I know I should have called first. If you don't want to see me, I understand. 3 minutes passed. Then his phone buzzed. Apartment 3B, doors unlocked. The apartment was small but cozy. Lorelei had decorated with care, soft throws over a second-hand couch, plants on every available surface, photographs covering one wall. She wore sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. Without makeup, younger than she looked in her catering uniform. Couldn't stay away? She said, but there was no judgment in her voice. Apparently not. He stood awkwardly in her doorway. I just found out some things about my sister, about how long she's been doing this. And I realized, he stopped, searching for words. I realized I don't want to be alone tonight. Lorelei studied his face, then stepped aside. Come in. They sat on her couch and he told her about his conversation with Richard, about the caseworker's visit to Claire, about the growing certainty that this situation was going to get worse before it got better. I'm scared, he admitted. Not for me, for Oliver, for Claire, for you. Everyone around me is getting hurt because of my sister's need to control everything. You're not responsible for her choices, Lorelei said firmly, but I'm responsible for mine. And choosing to pursue custody, choosing to, he looked at her, choosing to care about you. Those choices are putting people at risk. So what, you should just give up? Let her win? Maybe that would be easier. Easier isn't the same as right. She shifted closer, taking his hand. My dad chose easy. He chose to walk away when things got hard. when the responsibilities became too much. And you know what that left us with? Nothing but damage and questions and the belief that we weren't worth fighting for. That's not. You have a son who deserves a father who fights. And you have people around you, Claire, me, your Uncle Richard, who are choosing to stand with you. Don't insult us by giving up because it's scary. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. The determination there, the fierce protectiveness, made something shift in his chest. She wasn't just supporting him. She was all in despite the cost. I took your job offer, she said quietly. I start Monday, 25 an hour, flexible schedule, full benefits. I'm choosing you too, Nathaniel, so don't you dare back down now. The distance between them disappeared. He didn't know who moved first, but suddenly his hands were in her hair, and her lips were on his, and everything else fell away. The kiss was desperate and tender, and full of all the things they hadn't said yet. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she pressed her forehead to his. This is probably a terrible idea, she whispered. Probably, he agreed. Your life is a mess right now. Completely. And I'm about to be your employee, which is all kinds of inappropriate. Very inappropriate. She smiled against his lips. Good. I'm tired of appropriate. They spent the night on her couch, talking and kissing and planning their next moves like war strategists. By 3 a.m. they had a plan. Fight Margaret with everything they had, protect Oliver at all costs, and stop letting fear dictate their choices. Nathaniel left as dawn broke, promising to pick her up Monday morning for her first day. He drove home feeling more hopeful than he had in weeks. But when he pulled into his driveway, that hope evaporated. Police cars. 2 of them. Lights off, but unmistakably official. And standing on his porch with 2 officers was Margaret, her expression a careful mask of concern. There he is, she said as he got out of the car. Officers, this is my brother. I'm worried about his mental state. He's been making erratic decisions, threatening family members, and I have evidence that he may be a danger to himself or others. One of the officers stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, we need to ask you some questions. Nathaniel looked at the 2 officers, then at his sister standing behind them with that carefully composed expression of concern. Every instinct screamed at him to defend himself, to argue, to fight. But Lorelei's words echoed in his mind. Don't let fear dictate your choices. Of course, officers, he said calmly. I'm happy to answer any questions. Would you like to come inside? Margaret's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe frustration. She'd expected him to react emotionally, to give her ammunition. The older officer, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, nodded. That would be helpful, Mr. Brooks. They settled in his living room, the same space where he'd hosted that Christmas party just weeks ago. Margaret sat rigidly in one of the wing chairs while the officers took the couch. Nathaniel remained standing, controlled and present. Your sister called us with some concerns, the female officer began. She says you've been behaving erratically, making threats, and she's worried about your mental stability. I understand her concern, Nathaniel said evenly, though I'd characterize the situation differently. May I show you something? He pulled out his phone and opened his email, showing them the surveillance video Margaret had sent of Claire's house. 3 days ago, my sister sent me this video. She's been conducting surveillance on my ex-wife's home, where my 16-month-old son lives. The officers exchanged glances. She also filed a false CPS report yesterday, claiming my ex-wife was neglecting our child. The caseworker found no evidence of neglect. He pulled up more emails, more text messages. She contacted my business partners, my ex-wife's employer, even hired investigators to dig into people I'm associated with, all in an attempt to control my life and my access to my son. That's not, Margaret started, but the younger officer held up a hand. Ma'am, let him finish. Nathaniel met his sister's eyes. 2 years ago, while I was sedated in the hospital, Margaret intercepted messages from my ex-wife telling me she was pregnant. She responded from my phone, telling Claire I didn't want to be involved. She stole 16 months of my son's life from me. His voice remained steady, but emotion bled through. When I discovered the truth and confronted her, she didn't apologize. She said she was protecting me, and when I asked her to leave my home, she started this campaign to prove I'm mentally unfit. These are serious allegations, the female officer said, looking at Margaret. He's twisting everything, Margaret said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. I was trying to help him. He's been under enormous stress. The surveillance video, Nathaniel interrupted. Can you explain why you were watching Claire's house? I wanted to make sure Oliver was safe. By stalking his mother? By building a false case against her? He turned back to the officers. I have documentation of everything. Phone records, emails, testimony from the private investigator she tried to hire. My lawyer has already filed restraining orders. The female officer stood. Mr. Brooks, thank you for your cooperation. Margaret, I think we need to have a different conversation. Outside. As they walked Margaret toward the door, she turned back to look at Nathaniel. For the first time, her mask completely fell away. He saw fear there, desperation, the realization that she'd finally gone too far. I love you, she said, and it sounded like goodbye. I know, Nathaniel replied quietly, but that was never the problem. After they left, he stood alone in his silent house. His phone buzzed immediately. Texts from Jonathan, from Claire, from Lorelei, who'd somehow already heard what happened. But before he could respond to any of them, there was a knock at the door. Claire stood on his porch, Oliver in her arms. The police called me, she said. They wanted to verify your story. I told them everything. She shifted Oliver on her hip. He woke up crying for you. I thought maybe... Come in, Nathaniel said immediately, stepping aside. Oliver reached for him the moment he saw him, saying Dada, with such certainty it made Nathaniel's chest ache. He took his son in his arms, breathing in that familiar baby smell, feeling the solid weight of him. It's over, Claire said softly, watching them. The police said they're recommending charges against Margaret for harassment and filing false reports. And Nathaniel, she touched his arm gently. I'm sorry, for believing those messages were really from you, for not pushing harder to reach you. You did what you thought was right, we both did. He looked down at Oliver, who was playing with his shirt collar, completely content. But from now on, we'd do what's right for him. Together. Together, Claire agreed. She stayed for an hour, and they talked, really talked, about custody arrangements, about co-parenting, about building something functional from the ashes of their failed marriage. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even entirely comfortable, but it was honest. After she left, Nathaniel texted Lorelei, It's done, she's gone, can I see you? Her response came immediately. I'm already in my car. She arrived 20 minutes later, and the moment he opened the door, she was in his arms. No words needed. Just the comfort of someone who'd stood beside him when everything fell apart. How do you feel? She asked finally, pulling back to look at his face. Exhausted, relieved, sad. He traced his thumb across her cheek. Grateful. For what? For you. For showing up at a Christmas party and being brave enough to care about a stranger's problems. He smiled slightly. For accepting a job offer from a man whose life was falling apart. About that job offer, she said. Maybe we should revisit the terms since we're, she gestured between them. Since we're what? I don't actually know what we are. She bit her lip, suddenly uncertain. This all happened so fast. We're two people who found each other at the worst possible time, Nathaniel said, and decided that was exactly the right time after all. She smiled, then kissed him softly. So what happens now? Now I rebuild. My relationship with my son. My company without Margaret's influence, my life on my own terms. He tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. And if you're willing, I'd like you to be part of that life. Not as my employee, as something more. How much more? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. Me too, she whispered. They stood in his doorway as the sun rose over the estate, both of them aware that this was just the beginning. There would be legal battles ahead. Margaret wouldn't disappear quietly. The damage she'd caused would take time to heal. But for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt like his life was truly his own. And standing beside him was someone who'd chosen him not for his money or his status or what he could provide, but simply for who he was. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. 2 years later, the late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of the renovated townhouse, casting warm light across the hardwood floors. Nathaniel sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, watching his son, now 3 years old, build an elaborate tower out of wooden blocks. Higher, Daddy, Oliver commanded, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he concentrated on placing another block. Any higher and it's going to fall, buddy. No, it won't. I'm careful, Nathaniel smiled, recognizing his own stubborn determination in that small face. Oliver had his mother's eyes, but his father's intensity, and the combination made for a remarkably willful toddler. The tower swayed. Oliver held his breath, steadying it with one tiny hand. When it held, he looked up at Nathaniel with a grin of pure triumph. See, I did it. You absolutely did. Good job, Oliver. The front door opened, and Lorelei walked in carrying grocery bags, her blonde hair pulled back in a braid. She'd moved in 6 months ago, a decision that felt both monumental and perfectly natural. The apartment had been too small for both of them, and Nathaniel's mansion felt too empty. This townhouse, halfway between both their old lives, felt exactly right. Uncle Oliver is building, Oliver announced, still focused on his tower. I can see that, Lorelei said, setting down the bags and crossing to kiss Nathaniel. It's very impressive. She'd taken to motherhood with the same quiet grace she brought to everything else. Not Oliver's mother, but someone who loved him fiercely nonetheless. Someone who read him bedtime stories and kissed scraped knees and taught him to be kind. Claire called, Nathaniel said, standing and helping her with the groceries. She wants to switch weekends. She's got a work conference in Seattle and wants to take Oliver with her, show him where she grew up. That sounds nice. What did you say? I said yes, he'd love it. They'd found their rhythm over the past 2 years. 3 adults raising 1 child, navigating schedules and holidays and milestones together. It wasn't traditional, but it worked. Claire had met someone, a kind man named Thomas who taught elementary school and didn't flinch when Oliver called Nathaniel Daddy. There was talk of marriage, of maybe giving Oliver a sibling. Nathaniel found he was genuinely happy for her. The company was thriving. Without Margaret's controlling influence, Nathaniel had restructured Brooks International, bringing in fresh leadership and expanding into markets his sister had always deemed too risky. Lorelei had proven to be exceptional at her job, organized, intuitive, and respected by everyone who worked with her. They'd had to be careful about their relationship at first, but eventually the board recognized what everyone else already knew. She was qualified, capable, and exactly where she belonged. There's something I need to tell you, Lorelei said as they put away groceries. Her tone made him look up. What is it? I got a letter. From Margaret. Nathaniel's hands stilled. His sister's name could still create a knot in his chest even after 2 years. After the criminal charges, after the restraining order, after the complete severing of their relationship. What did it say? Lorelei pulled an envelope from her purse, handing it to him. She sent it to the office. It's addressed to both of us. He opened it carefully. Margaret's handwriting, precise, controlled, familiar. Nathaniel and Lorelei, I am writing this from a place of genuine reflection, which I know may be hard to believe. The past 2 years have forced me to confront truths about myself that I spent a lifetime avoiding. My therapist calls it enmeshment, the inability to see where I end and the people I love begin. I called it love. I was wrong. I destroyed my relationship with my father by refusing to let him die with dignity. I drove away my brother by needing to be right more than I needed to be kind. And I nearly destroyed you, Nathaniel, by believing I knew what was best for you better than you knew yourself. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I am writing to say what I should have said 2 years ago. I am sorry. I am sorry for stealing your choice. I am sorry for the pain I caused Claire and Oliver. I am sorry for trying to destroy Lorelei simply because she represented something I couldn't control. I am learning, slowly, painfully, that love without respect is just another form of violence. That protection without trust is just imprisonment by another name. I don't expect to be part of your life again, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I did, and I am genuinely, deeply sorry. With love and regret, Margaret. Nathaniel read it twice, then handed it to Lorelei. She read in silence while he processed his own tangled emotions. Do you believe her? Lorelei asked finally. I think she believes herself. Whether that translates to actual change, he shrugged. I don't know, and I'm not sure I need to know. Do you want to respond? He thought about it, about his sister, alone somewhere, finally facing the wreckage she'd caused, about the brother she'd protected so fiercely she'd nearly destroyed him, about the complicated truth that someone could love you and hurt you simultaneously. Maybe someday, he said, but not today. Today I have everything I need right here. Oliver appeared in the kitchen doorway, dragging his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Daddy, can we go to the park? After dinner, buddy. But I want to go now. I know, but we need to eat first. How about you help Lorelei make the salad? Oliver considered this, then climbed onto a step stool by the counter. Okay, but then park. You promised. I promised. As Nathaniel watched Lorelei guide Oliver's small hands through tearing lettuce, something caught in his throat. This scene, so ordinary, so beautifully mundane, was everything his sister had tried to prevent. She'd been so certain he wasn't ready for fatherhood, for responsibility, for anything messy or complicated or real. But he'd built this life anyway, on his own terms, with people who chose to be here, not because they thought they knew what was best for him, but because they wanted to share the journey. That evening, they went to the park as promised. Oliver ran ahead, shouting for them to watch as he conquered the slide for what must have been the 100th time. Lorelei's hand found Nathaniel's, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. "I've been thinking," she said, watching Oliver play. About what you asked me 6 months ago. The question you said we'd revisit when things settled down." His heart rate picked up. He knew exactly what she meant. The conversation they'd had about making things permanent, about building something that lasted beyond just living together. "And?" he prompted. She turned to face him, green eyes reflecting the golden hour light. "Ask me again." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee right there on the grass beside the playground, while Oliver squealed on the slide and other parents pretended not to stare. "Lorelei Ashford, will you marry me?" She laughed, pulling him to his feet and kissing him. "Yes, obviously yes." Oliver ran over, confused but excited by the sudden attention. "What's happening?" "Lorelei is going to be part of our family forever," Nathaniel explained, pulling his son into their embrace. "She already is," Oliver said matter-of-factly, then squirmed away. "Can I go on the swings now?" They watched him run off, and Lorelei leaned her head on Nathaniel's shoulder. "He's not wrong. I've been family for a while. I know, but now it's official." As the sun set over the park, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, Nathaniel thought about the journey that had brought him here, the devastating discovery at a Christmas party, the sister who loved him too much and too wrongly, the woman who showed up when he needed someone most, the son he'd almost never known. Every painful moment, every betrayal, every fear, all of it had led to this, to Oliver laughing on the swings, to Lorelei's hand in his, to a life he'd built himself, on his own terms, with people who chose to be there. Margaret had been wrong about everything except one thing. He had changed, but not in the way she feared. He'd changed by learning to trust his own judgment, to make his own mistakes, to build his own happiness without needing someone else's permission, and that made all the difference. Later that night, after Oliver was asleep and Lorelei was planning their simple wedding, Nathaniel stood in the doorway of his son's room. He watched Oliver's chest rise and fall with deep, peaceful sleep, clutching that stuffed dinosaur like a lifeline. 2 years ago, he hadn't known this child existed. Now he couldn't imagine existing without him. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best ones, not despite the pain, but because of it. Because pain forces us to choose, break or rebuild into something stronger. Nathaniel had chosen to rebuild, and he'd built something beautiful. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace with someone you love and protecting your own truth? How did you navigate that impossible choice? And do you think forgiveness is always necessary for healing? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.